Okay, so it's still February the 20, whatever it was, Sunday, 2022. Whatever I said in the last video that I did. But now I'm up at Bradfield, the picnic area, and as you can see, it's kind of flooded the picnic area. Duck over there seems to be quite enjoying it. But as you can see here, I'm not getting out of my car this time. The water's just running down the road, down from the hills, and again it's just completely overwhelming the water course. And this part of we're kind of up at the higher echelons of the Loxley Valley, so actually this is more like Agdon Beck. This comes from Agdon Reservoir, which is just up there, and then it joins along there with on the right water coming down from Dale Dyke Reservoir, and then that goes into Dam Flask, which is really overflowing now, and then as you've seen the result of that down in the Loxley Valley. So I just get the impression that when you have several storm events one after another happening, I think we're going to need more radical proposals than what's presently promoted, along the lines of we need to be a bit more savvy about looking into long-range weather forecasting to make sure that we can create a certain level of capacity within our reservoirs. Sheffield's very fortunate because as a city we are surrounded by so many reservoirs, and so if we have a situation like we've just had, one of the driest Januaries on record, and yet 3 weeks later we're now dealing with some of the most major flooding that we've seen. Well, there was another flood event in 2019 around about this time, if I remember right, of similar levels. We really, there's a lot of work going on up in the moorlands in building these leaky dams and trying to re-wet the moorlands, build up the sphagnum moss up there to hold more water. But once those systems are overwhelmed, which they are going to be in the middle of winter, when you have several storm events coming one after another, once those systems are overwhelmed, it's as if they don't exist. All that water from a leaky dam, once your leaky dam fills up so that it's flowing over the top, really it's held back a few hundred or a few thousand litres of water, or gallons of water, but okay, it's taken that capacity out of the system, at least temporarily. But once those are filled up and it's just flowing over the top, because you've had these several storms one after another, then you're left with this regardless of what you do further upstream. I mean, we talk a lot about more tree planting. Well, that's great, but and I understand all the mechanisms in play. Once trees come into leaf in April, May, right through to September, October, obviously they're taking up water out of the soil, so they're helping to reduce flooding by doing that. Also, as it rains, whether a tree is in leaf or whether it's lost its foliage, it will take a certain amount of time for the rain that falls on any one particular tree to run down each stem and each branch and the trunk itself, or to drip off a branch, to actually drop onto the ground, to soak into the soil, to kind of go into the river and flood somewhere. But that's inevitably going to happen anyway, as I say, when you have several major storm events happening one after the other. The other negative side of trees, planting more trees, which people don't seem to have cottoned onto yet, is when a root system is not taking up water, and don't forget for 6 months of the year it's not actually taking up any water because it's, you know, it's dormant. Basically what you've got is concrete in the soil. You've got solid wood permeating throughout the soil, and the bigger the tree, the bigger the root ball, the wider those roots spread. So actually you are going to reduce the capacity of the soil to hold water in winter the more trees that you have in a particular area. Now that may sound to a lot of people, that might sound ridiculous, but it's just factually true. If you imagine each root system of a tree, which is not taking up any water, is basically a solid piece of wood in the ground, and okay, wood has a certain permeability. It will even when that root is not in action in taking up water, it will have a certain amount of porosity to it. And these roots will be saturated already, just like concrete has a certain porosity to it, and you know, water can seep into it and whatever, and do damage to various concrete structures over time. And so can any rock. It can absorb a certain amount of water. The fact of the matter is, the more trees that you have in an area in winter during events like this, the more it will, despite it taking longer for all the rain drop off to kind of run down or to drop off the branches and go into the soil, than if the tree wasn't there. As I say, when you have a storm event like this, it doesn't matter because the tree's completely wet anyway. But that solid root ball in the soil is still taking up a certain amount of capacity that would otherwise be there taking up water, because the soil would be more spongy and able to take up water. There is no soil there where the root is. The soil is around the root, it is surrounding the root, and the root is attached to the soil. But as I said before, the problem is the root is basically a solid piece of matter in the soil. So I think planting more trees, yes, because they have a wider environmental impact, a wider positive environmental impact. But if you're just talking about trees in wanting to reduce flooding, I think you're making a big mistake in looking at trees to address this problem, specifically the problem of flooding. So yeah, despite the flooding, it's still very beautiful up here at Bradfield. So yeah, I hope people take on board what I've said and actually understand what I've said. Because when people get attached to a certain ideological position, be it environmentalism or whatever it happens to be, they tend to just delude themselves and not see a negative side. Or if there is a negative side, they push it to the back of their mind. And you can't do that. If you're trying to solve problems in the world, you need to address all the variables, both positive and negative. And then work with the information that you've got without giving favour to any one particular side. Yes, trees, as far as their wider impact on addressing climate change, planting more trees is what we need, the right tree in the right place, all that, etc. But if it comes to just addressing flooding, especially during the winter months rather than the summer months, the more trees you plant, my thought is the more flooding you will get within those parameters. So I'll leave you with that quite radical underlying thought, as it still absolutely throws it down. Bye for now.